Welcome to Art Speak with Burnaway, an online magazine dedicated to contemporary art. Each week we engage in dialogue with artists, critics, curators, scholars to bring context to current and upcoming events in the arts in Atlanta. I'm Jeremy Abernathy, editor of Burnaway. My guest today is Corrina Sephora Mensoff, local artist and organizer of Flowing as Water, a multimedia experience debuting this Saturday, November 5th at the Goat Farm.
Corrina, Corrina, off we go to the wild blue sea. Corrina, Corrina, off we go to the wild blue sea. Corrina.
Flowing as Water is a three-person collaboration between yourself, Matt Gilbert, and Anna Balka. That is a visual artist, an animator, and a sound artist.
I have been working with the boat form and aspects of water, the surface of the water, and I call it modern archaic, really old techniques and tools and maybe even ideas and imagery mixed with contemporary design or format.
So this Flowing as Water project looks like a series of watercolor paintings that were still but are now in motion. The characters move their hands, the boats move across the water, even the hair flows in the wind, the clothes respond to wind as well. Could you tell us a little bit about the story that goes with this animation?
Yes. It's interesting. There's a story that I recalled recently after I named a show on the surface of the water, which goes sort of like this. My mother was pregnant with me, and she was jumping into the water, and she says that she heard this voice, and the voice said, "My name is Corrina. You have to name me Corrina." And it's always been sort of a mystery. She was adopted, and so that was actually her name, and she didn't find out until I was about 2. Her parents told her, why did you name your daughter what your name used to be? Something, I can't remember how it went. And, she came up with some reason that wasn't that she heard a voice. It was a Bob Dylan song or, something more reasonable. So that was sort of a branching off point. And it's always been a mystery to me, who my grandmother would be, who is this third link? And my mother had sort of a tough first year of her life. And I wanted to, make it more beautiful. And so rather than a home on Staten Island, I decided it would be a castle in the Mediterranean. A lot of the imagery comes from my travels overseas, Croatia, Romania, France. And so a lot of it is really my imagination and then working references from my travel journals and photographs. But the story, it's really kind of meant to be looked at almost like a fairy tale. Or, there's even a dragon in it at one point, and I've made these very poetic names. Like my imaginary grandmother, her name is Mare Deslia, and mer is French for ocean, and, flowers show up a lot in the imagery. And there's always water, always boats, and some interesting form of architecture. I don't usually incorporate people in work. Oftentimes I work with things very symbolically, imagery that's symbolically. I'll use a boat form instead of a person. So it's an interesting experience. But the storyline is very much like a fairy tale, and essentially it weaves together a history of my mother and her mother and my mother and me, and it kind of ends in a, again, sort of fairy tale sort of way of disappearing actually in my artwork, which is, I guess, maybe poetic and true for my own life. I think everyone in the world, has some relationship in some sense. We all have parents at some point, whether we were raised, even partway through this process, actually right on this street, I went to, it's called Families First, and it's a group of people who are either adopted or are looking for their parents, or parents who gave up their children. It's sort of a support group. And I went one evening, and I have a friend who goes to that, and she had the story of her finding her parents, but them actually not wanting to have anything to do with her, which is the real nightmare for people who do that. My own mom looked for a little while, but being New York City, and all of that, and paper records as opposed to computer file records like we have now, it was difficult. But one of the women I presented that I had an art project that I was working on dealing with this idea of adoption and parents and issues surrounding that. And one of the women actually said, I wish I could just make up a story like you. So in a sense, it's making up a story, but in essence, this is my effort at creating a new story, going back into the past and looking at situations and homes and relationships and decisions and kind of coming to peace with things in a way.
Again, this is Jeremy Abernathy with Burnaway. My guest today has been Corrina Sephora Mensoff, and we've been discussing her exhibition Flowing as Water, debuting this Saturday, November 5th from 6 to 10 p.m. at the Goat Farm, followed by a panel discussion and performance on November 19th. Thank you again for listening to ArtSpeak. We'll see y'all next week.